This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. Hey everyone, I want to thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. Something that's a first and has never happened before on my shows is my guest and I just started speaking and we just hit record. So what you're going to listen to is just a live recording of us talking in studio. I soon introduce him, but I want to introduce him right now because he's going to be talking for the next 19 minutes and you need to know all about him. His name is Cameron Toth, and he is the CEO and owner of Toth Event Staffing. You're going to learn so much more about his company and what he does and about him, but please enjoy listening.
And just remind me really quickly, your audience, who are we kind of talking to?
Great question. And let's just make sure these are silent. I just thought about that.
Yeah.
I said that last time, and then my alarm went off during I was like, make sure everything on silent. And then I had set an alarm for midday.
My kid calling me on Facebook Messenger. I'm just going to turn this off.
Just turn it off silent. So that's a really great question. So the audience is entrepreneurs, business leaders, right? I identify business leaders as people that are working in a corporate position and are growing, entrepreneurs as, business owners, things like that. And they're any stage in their career from getting started in their career to full blown. We have 100 employees like yourself kind of in their career. And the whole purpose of the podcast is there's the entertainment element in that it's a conversation, right? So if you're sitting listening to it, you don't feel like this is a lesson, this is a self-help guide to, this is a story that I'm listening to. I'm tuning into this story. And in this story, I'm learning from this person. And that you're that person, right? So they're perfect. Learning
we got very similar audiences. So.
From your story, from your challenges, from your successes, they're learning from that. So that's what it's all about. And the other thing I always say is, just imagine it as we're at a cocktail party. We just met. Hey, I'm Michael. Hey, I'm Cameron. What's your deal? How'd you get into what you're doing? And, an hour goes by and we just got into our life stories together.
And your main business is real estate, right? Den 10 is
insurance.
Insurance. Okay.
Yeah. Real estate is who I'd like to come over to us. We want those realtors for sure. But yeah, we're insurance. So actually this is done by my other business, my media company. So this is Michael Esposito Inc. that puts this show on. And this is the Michael Esposito Show.
And Den 10 is the insurance company, right?
Den 10 is the sponsor to this, correct. So Den 10 sponsors the whole show. So back in the day.
But that's your insurance company, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. Actually, I have them both up there. Back in the day when I first started the podcast, I was like, I want to get sponsors for the show and find people and everything. And then when I started Den 10, I was like, well, I actually had heard a Paul Logan thing. Actually, we should bring this up because this is good for the audience. But Paul Logan, I don't know if you know him, big YouTuber,
yeah.
right? And he had gotten all these offers for swag and all this other stuff and merch. That's what it was to promote on his YouTube channel. And he said no to all of it because he was like, I'm going to promote my own merch and then sell it. And it was after I heard that one that I was just like, you know what? Why am I going to put other people on as sponsors for the show? Put Den 10 on, that's my company, right? Like make that the sponsor. Plus it eliminates me having to look for sponsors, to be honest. It makes my life a little easier.
Yeah, I think the sponsorship is an interesting thing because I do BizDev Live and then I have another show with Steven Spiro. And so for that show, we have sponsors that's kind of in-kind sponsors. It's not big money stuff, but it's a great way to start for a show, number one. And two, there are things that we're actually using. So we've actually used the product, like they came and trained us. So it's been it's beautiful. And I owe that to Steve Spiro because he connected with these folks. He's the master connector show. And so he connected with these folks and got the deal in the works. It's always nice when somebody else is doing it versus you, right? And so he's putting that stuff together and it's been a beautiful thing. So there's lots of ways to do the sponsorship piece. And I think, it's a little bit different for everybody. So it's nice to actually.
I'm learning that too, like the collaborating with other businesses and business owners. I experienced this just recently with an event that I just put on that you might have seen on LinkedIn or whatever. And we had to cancel the event. We had to postpone the event because we didn't have enough audience. And so through that, I had been talking about it for a little bit about collaborating with another organization.
What was the challenge to getting the audience?
I think my network too small. It's only my network. They all came to the first event, and I think this too with events is like, you're going to have your supporters, right? You're going to have your people that believe in you and support you. And they're going to come not because of the content or the value that it offers, while it does offer all of that, right? They're going to come to support you.
Right.
And so for my first event, they all showed up, right? So it was awesome. It was like I looked around the room and I knew every single face that was there.
Yeah.
And I knew I was like, this is a double-edged sword, because on one end, this is so great to feel the support and love from my community that I've created, right? That I've established. It's great. It's a great feeling. But I also knew by looking out to most of them that they weren't there for the content. They were there for me.
Right.
And so therefore, they wouldn't show up to the next event. Not because they don't want to, but because they're like, hey, I showed my support. I gave it to you.
Yeah.
And now it's on you, Michael, right? And so in all truth, I don't think my network expands enough to...
I think there's... When I hear that, the thing that I go to is the value of multiple associations, right?
Yes,
and so
I agree.
Making sure that I read a ton, and so you got books like I've just finished Never Eat Alone by Keith Ferrazzi, which I really, really deeply recommend that book. I was surprised at how long it was. I was listening to it on Audible, and I picked up the physical version. That's typically what I'll do if something's really good and I want to go back and reference it. I'll pick up the physical version. So if you say, if Cameron Toth has picked up the physical version of it, you can say, you know what, it's probably a pretty good, because if you made it through Audible and didn't want to get the physical version, probably not that great of a book, not something that you would want to go back to, right? There's exceptions that I would say are great books. I know Will Smith is a controversial figure right now, but I listened to his book. It was great. I won't pick up I don't know if I want to listen to it again, but it was a great listen.
It's interesting. When that happened, which we're obviously talking about the slap, right? And what makes it controversial, that was something I spoke about with my coach right away. I was just like, all right, let's break this down. And it wasn't, let's break it down from a gossip angle. It was, let's break this down as to what happened so that doesn't happen to me. And so that I can help others that it doesn't happen to them. And I'll give the because in a second. But I think Will Smith, if you know anything about him or follow him at all on social media and everything, he is a self-development guru, right? He digs into self-development. He digs into the work. Yeah. And he puts in the work.
His wife as well, yeah.
He puts in the work. And so for that to have happened, there's some heavy baggage in the background that triggered something.
I think it's one of those things, for me at least, absolutely ununderstandable. To me, it's unfathomable.
Right. And that's why we talked about it, was because for something like that to happen to someone like that has put in so much work in self-development, that has become
He's a smart guy.
That has become a mentor in self-development, right? Like if you follow his channels, he puts out positive messages. He puts out positive affirmations. He puts out and I didn't read his book, but I would love to hear from you in terms of the book. From what I saw, because I watched the YouTube series that he put out on the book, it was to help others, to help them through his story.
The book talks a lot about his trauma, right? And it talks about his challenges. He really lays out, and I talk a lot on BizDev Live, and when I'm speaking to somebody trying to mentor them, I talk about my failures, my defeats.
Right.
And he definitely teaches from his failures and defeats. And so that's why the slap, right, was unfathomable to me, because he's been through that stuff. He knows enough that he knows better. And so to get up in front, especially in that room, in that environment, televised, You have to think that something beyond was triggered. I mean, a loss of consciousness kind of moment. And so, I didn't think about talking about it with a therapist or anything or a coach or anything like that. But I think it is a good thing to sort of put yourself in a place of like, how can I delay gratitude, right? Because I think that's one of those big entrepreneurship lessons is I'm angry. And I just had a moment the other day and I didn't react that great. I didn't slap anybody, but I was upset. And I think anytime, especially in business, if you're upset,
right,
you're to that moment where the blood pressure is rising, your voice is noticeably raised in frustration. It's an indication that something is wrong and you need to check yourself.
Right.
And that's tough. That is tough. Because we all have those moments, especially you get into that position. Whether you're an entrepreneur that is paying a vendor, so you're small, solopreneur, and you have partners and people that you're paying to do a service for you, or you have actual employees that you're paying to do things for you, that idea that you work for them, you're responsible to them. And yes, there's deliverables and things that they're supposed to do for you, but there's never an okay moment for me to be like, what's wrong with you, Michael? Right. When we think about raising children, and I always, have this huge contradiction in my head. I don't want to talk about staff like children. I don't want to be parental to employees.
Right.
But is there ever a good time to like yell and grab your kids? Like, and I'm sure there's going to be somebody that's like, no, giving them a pow, that's healthy. And, I wouldn't disagree for certain situations. But when you're trying to set the tone and grow people, whether it's your children or your employees, if you're not setting the tone, if you're not setting the example, are you a good leader?
It's a really great question, what you just asked there. And I think for our listeners out there, it's like, think about that question, right? Like if you're not setting the tone, are you a great leader? Great question. Something that with what you're just talking about there that I'm thinking about is, we talk about this a lot in business, and I'm sure you've heard this too, is what you give is what you get.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we talk a lot about that in terms of like getting business, earning more. And we talk about it in these positive lights of like getting better results, right?
Yeah.
But it also works in the if something works in the positive, it works in the negative. Just like if something works in the negative, it works in the positive. So if you're giving a lot of confrontational, right, leadership of arguing, screaming, grabbing, whatever, well, guess what? Your employees are going to think it's okay to do the same amongst themselves. Eventually
going back to the parents and the kids, you see it all the time. If you see the kid
screaming at the parent,
screaming and grabbing the parent,
right?
What do you think?
Where did they learn that? It's learned behavior.
Dad, I learned it from watching you. If anybody remembers that commercial, right?
Now, the thing is, though, is I think you talked about this. I don't remember just now, but there's a forgiveness element, and there's a thing to give yourself grace.
Yeah.
In that we all have moments where we lose our cool, our blood pressure rises. And this goes back to the whole Will Smith thing. It's realizing the mistake that we made. And attempting, because nobody's perfect, right? So attempting to not do it again. And so in going back to the whole having a conversation with my coach about it's around that. It was around we're going to make mistakes. How do we recover from them? And she then told me, so her name's Merritt. She's been on the show before too. So Merritt goes, it's funny, Michael, because I was just like, hey, I didn't expect this conversation to happen about Will Smith, right? And she goes, well, you know what? In my coaching circle, we're talking about it because this is like a case study, right? This is a learning that we can all get out of this.
He's a millionaire, probably a billionaire.
Right. And this is, we can all learn from this experience. And somebody that has dug into the world of self-development, that has worked on themselves so strongly and then to make a mistake like this.
Yeah.
The question is, how do you recover from it now? How do you fix what happened? How do you move forward with it, right? And he's got a lot of different pressures than we have because he has the big societal pressures of the media and everything else. We're fortunate in that we're not in the media's eye all the time, right? In the world that we live in. We eventually hope to become, some of us, right? But for the most part, our media is our social handles, right? Our Facebooks and all that stuff. So we're fortunate that we can recover a lot quicker. But the thing is that one, we realize that no matter how much we work on ourselves, we can make a mistake. And we can make a mistake on a grand stage like that. And there's a whole bunch to unfold there. But the next thing is that how do we recover from it? And what do we do next to recover from it? And I think that goes into everything we talk about in terms of business, not just making a mistake, but just life in the world of business, right?
There's a lot to unpack there. I would say if you cannot make the mistake,
don't make it.
Don't make it, because it takes
Well, you got to find the gap.
It takes a lot of work to clean things up. So, I mean, I think the first thing, to promote kind of what we're doing here is to learn from others. And I think that's, again, talking about the challenge that Will Smith had in order to make sure that you never have it is great learning. And that's what you want to do, right? And so to prevent those mistakes from happening. When I started my company, Toth Event Staffing, in 2011,
we haven't even done an introduction yet of that, but we will.
I made a ton of mistakes, right? And so as I went through, it became more and more obvious that I needed mentorship. I needed help. And much like the beginning of my story, if we want to go back there, but I noticed early on in my childhood, in my development, this is, looking back 2020, right? Noticing like I just was not looking for mentorship. I was not looking for people to guide me. I'm sitting there thinking, I just got to figure it all out myself. And then throwing up my hands because I'm like, you know what? This system is rigged. And we hear these things, right? We hear these things out inside, right? The system is rigged. My vote doesn't matter. Nobody's trying to help me. This all sucks. The system sucks. And so if you're a person that doesn't realize like all of the answers are in the books, in the people around you, that it's an abundant world, that there is so much available to you at your fingertips now more than ever, right? We got these little devices that, we can just literally reach out and connect with the world. And maybe you don't even have one of these. You can go to the public library if you're in the States. This is something that is a personal passion of mine, is just helping people to understand that you have all of these incredible resources at your disposal, a lot of them free. And, I was growing up in New York City. And so to be somebody that did all 4 years of high school and just didn't cross the finish line. Like, wait, you actually stayed in high school? You went to the classes, you did okay grade-wise, but you still didn't graduate? What the hell is going on with you? Like, what does it take mentally? But we see it all the time, right? People just not doing the work, but not executing and crossing the finish line. Knowing that they have potential and possibility, but not completing what they started, right? How many businesses fail before they even truly get started, right? And so to know that you can access coaches, mentorship, to go dig into the books, find things around business models. I have a whole show on BizDev Live around business models, because just the idea that, yes, if you sell a product or service at a certain rate and you do that at an amount greater than what you spent for your personal service, right, which for you may cost literally nothing, and let's not get into like cost of all your life stuff, but I go out and I work for $30, $50, $100 an hour. I pay me, that's $100 in my pocket, right? Or I sell a candy bar for $2, it cost me $1. I made $1 in profit, right? That's not the only business model that exists, right? We were just talking about, as we were jumping on sponsorship, we were talking about different ways for in-kind services. There's so many different business models out there, but you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
And so I think it's incredibly fascinating. As I'm 11 years into my entrepreneurship journey, I'm still like, oh yeah, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so, just to know that there's more answers and more opportunities out there than you'll ever really truly understand, and to know that the world is an abundant place, that gives you a lot of hope and a lot of feeling of positivity. And hopefully that's enough where you'll never have to feel like you need to slap somebody, right? Because the door is always open, and we don't need those challenges, right? We don't need those problems.
I agree. I want to make sure that we introduce you properly here. I think what's really cool is we jumped right into some really great content for everyone, but it's always important that they know who's speaking here. And I don't even think they know your name yet. So let's dive into a little bit of an introduction about who you are and your story. I want to welcome my guest today. He trusted his heart by allowing the influence of music to lead him to a promising career as a DJ, bartender, and now CEO and owner of Toth Event Staffing, Inc. He's experienced challenges along the way, but he attributes a desire to learn and help others to his success. He's an entrepreneur, a mentor, and a fellow podcaster. You've already welcomed him because you've been listening to him for the past 15 minutes, but please welcome Cameron Toth.
That's all right. Toth.
Sorry,
you can call me whatever you want. Just don't call me late to dinner. Listen.
We can't edit that name now. It's in the podcast. Toth, thank you.
So one of the amazing things about my life is that I carry my mother's last name. And that's interesting because my grandmother had my mother at 19. My mother had me at 19. And then a major part of my story, in addition to failing out of high school and not getting my GED, is that I also had a child at 19.
At 19, three times. Wow.
Right. And so what happens when you're a young person, some of the societal things are not locked in. So my father's last name is McMahon, and I don't carry his last name, even though, and this is it's a weird thing. And I could have changed my name a lot of times in my life. And I don't know, for whatever reason, I was comfortable with sticking with Toth because that's the way things happen and that's the way they are, and it sort of lives with me. I didn't find out until I was 40 that I carried Jewish heritage. So I'm going and I'm in the events world, and I'm going to synagogues, and I'm working bat mitzvahs as a waiter, bartender, captain, and I'm saying, what a lovely culture these Jewish folks have. And then at 40, I'm watching DVD on disc, right? So that ages it a little bit. But I'm saying 40. At 30, I learned, right? So at 30,
I was going to say you can't be that much older than me. I'm looking at you.
So at 30, I'm learning this for the first time. That my grandmother came from Hungary during the kind of the push of the Iron Curtain right through Europe. My grandfather was. My great-grandfather was killed in the trees. They had him picking fruit. They turned the hoses on him in winter, frozen death crazy. They were a wealthy family in the middle of Budapest in Hungary. And so, the Holocaust, all that kind of stuff was going down. And so my grandmother fled Europe, came to the United States, had my mother, and the rest is sort of history, but I didn't know this because they just didn't talk about, so you can think about this with all that went down because of the Jewish heritage, all of what they lost. So I guess there's a good reason that my grandmother was just kind of I'm good with not sharing Jewish heritage, but it was really interesting when I found it out. So I carry, my mother's last name, which is Toth, which was passed down to us through history, right? So, and that came from my mother and father not being married. So when I was 19, and I grew up in New York City, I was born in Boston. My mother and father quickly came down to New York City, and then my mother was peace, because she was 19. My father was 38, close to 40 years old, right? At the time of my birth, she was like, peace, I'm out of here. And so she took me on a sojourn through like Texas and the southwestern states, finally wound up in California. By the age of 7, though, I was like, yeah, I'd like to stay with my dad. My mom, later found out, I didn't know this at the time, obviously at 7 or even in my young adulthood, was bipolar. Like there was stuff going on with my stepfather, a whole bunch of craziness. You got to think about the kind of chutzpah a 7-year-old has to be like, yeah, I want to go live with dad. Like that's not common for a boy that has his mom and everything, right? And I had siblings. So I went from New York City to New York City at the age of 7, stayed school years with my dad. I owe all my book knowledge, my love of books, as, my friends would talk about in our 57th Street apartment on between 9th and 10th. The house smelling musty like a library as they were coming into the building. He had bookshelves and everything. So that I owe my father so much. So 7 years on, I'm in New York City going to school. Summers, I'm spending time with my mom. For Christmas, we go spend time with my dad's folks in Missouri. So I definitely got like the full continental United States.
You were a world traveler at 7 years old.
and so
states traveler.
I'm looking for opportunities to go to Europe. I've never been overseas, but all around the United States. My wife is Mexican, so I spent a good amount of time in Mexico. Even been up to Toronto, Canada, but looking for more opportunities to travel. I love travel. So, but we get to high school, and so I already told you I didn't cross that finish line. So I'm dealing with some of the baggage. But my dad did such a great job with me. But in high school, he's doing it by himself. It's not easy raising a teenager by yourself. I don't know how single moms and dads do it. It's a tough job. I'm doing it with my wife. We have 4 kids, and people are like, "Oh, you got 4 kids?" But yeah, my daughter helps take care of the little ones. Like it's not a bad situation, and we still have challenges between my wife and I, Teresa and I, taking care of these kids. I can't imagine doing it on your own. So for everybody that's doing it on your own, keep your head up. We appreciate you. My dad did a great job with me. I owe him so much. But he had stuff going on while I was in high school. In addition to doing it on his own, working on his own, his best friend died. My grandparents started deteriorating back in St. Louis and Missouri, so he's dealing with that stuff. And so definitely not pushing me. And so that's like the big focus in my life right now as I'm working with my kids is, all right, my daughter's in high school, my son, Leo, and Alexandria is in high school and she's on the high honor roll. Leo is on the honor roll. He's coming into 9th grade right now. And so they know because I've told them over and over again. My dad didn't apply enough pressure and make sure that I was doing the things that I need to do. So, they got to gird their loins because it's, like my daughter feels the pressure from me. She comes home with a 91. I'm like, why isn't that 100? She comes home with a 96 and I'm like, yeah, is there anything we can do to get that up? And I know a lot of people are looking at it like, really, dude? But to me, if I got a job to do, is it okay to do 90% of the job, right? And so that's what I tell them all the time. And so that's the kind of discipline I'm trying to instill with them because I don't want them to ever feel like I do now. Like, why the hell didn't I just complete that high school degree? Why didn't I just take that? I mean, when you're graduating high school, and for anybody that's a parent out there, and if you're listening to this and you happen to be in high school, first of all, kudos to you. Listen to a business podcast in high school.
Oof. You're ahead of the curve.
Yeah, way ahead of the curve.
We wish we were you.
But if you have kids out there and they're in high school, it's such an amazing opportunity that you have as a young person. First of all, when we talk about opportunity and the opportunities for mentorship, Michael, if you get a call from a 16-year-old that you're familiar with, and they say, hey, I'd like to know a little bit more about your business. How excited are you to talk about your business?
It's incredible. I mean, like what you're speaking to, it's funny because I'm thinking about the 96, what you just said there. And just to break that down a little bit, it's not the fact that you want her to get 100, it's that she can get 100. So that's what you're speaking to there. It's if she could only hit 96.
If I knew
that 96
she
was
had
it.
done everything, full effort, and she came home with a 70, I'd be happy.
Yeah. So to that point, I'm driving the girls to basketball this morning, and we're having a conversation about basketball. And this is 2 7-year-olds, my daughter and her best friend. And then in front I have a 10-year-old who's the sibling. And they're asking me questions about basketball. I play basketball. And they're asking me questions. They're saying, I know how to dribble. I know how to shoot. They're not teaching me anything new. And so to your point about asking and us getting excited to help is like, it just turned into from a little bit of a question to all of a sudden I'm coaching to where I'm going, you dribble with the one hand below the waist, perfect that. And when you perfect that, get to the left hand, to the weak hand. Yeah. Perfect that. When you perfect that, start walking with it. And when you perfect that, start running with it. Yeah. And know that no matter how good you think you are right now or how good anybody else thinks that they are right now in your age groups and the 10-year-old age group, so none of you have reached any of your potential. You still have such a path to go.
As you're saying that, I'm like, that's all of life, every kind of business skill.
No matter how good you get, you have still not reached your potential. No. So she says, well, what about the kids that aren't doing it? And I said, well, don't worry about those kids. You let those kids not do it, but you focus on yourself and you make sure that you're doing your best job that you can do for yourself, because there's going to be another kid who's actually doing it and doing it better than you. Don't worry about that kid.
How many people are distracted by what other people are doing
right.
are not doing right now? Like, don't
worry about them. Worry about you and make sure that you're doing the best that you can do. And that's the conversation that we had. And let me tell you, part of the reason why this conversation started was she actually got in the car crying. She didn't want to go to camp today. She was frustrated from what I learned. She was frustrated with what was going on at camp. And through that conversation, she left the car. She was happy. She was smiling. She was excited to go. And so your question to me is, what would I do if that 16-year-old calls me and asks about? It's like, man, we're primed for this, right? Yeah. Like we want to give. So I think what your question is really like, there are mentors out there. All you got to do is call them.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I, the piece of it is when you're young, if the 40-year-old, 50-year-old insurance guy, places a call to you and says, hey, Michael, I really want your mentorship and expertise. You're like, F you, pay me, right? I mean, seriously, I'm, nice, familiar. Maybe you don't say that directly to them, but in your head, like, I know when I get a phone call from somebody that's like, hey, Cameron, I got a restaurant, can you mention to some of your folks that we have a need for a waiter or a bartender? I'm going to try to be nice, but at the same time, you're calling my business, asking for my expertise, my network that I charge people for, that I struggle on a daily basis to make more successful and pay all of the employee salaries plus pay my own salary and try to grow my future. You're going to call me asking me to do you a favor for something that I charge people for. I mean, to me, that takes some serious.
One thing I want to make clear here that you're talking about now is just to make a clear line here is that on one end, we're talking about mentorship. On the other one, this is business. What you're talking about is business. Is somebody's reaching out to you for business knowledge for what you charge for a service that you charge for. And maybe on a one-off as a favor to a friend or a colleague, you might do that. But you charge for that. Mentorship's a little bit different. Somebody asking you, hey, Cameron, listen, we're looking for someone. Right now, I can't afford your services. Could you give me a couple tips on what I can do internally? I'm sure you'd be open to doing that. Now, the other piece to all of that, right? And we learn
approach.
The approach. Yeah. And we learn about this with mentorship too, is that mentorship is a two-way street. Somebody can't just ask you for something without giving you something. They got to give you a little bit too. They don't know that, but there's something of like, just giving you the extra kudos of saying, hey, Cameron, what you've done over the past 10 years with your business is tremendous.
Yes.
I wish that my business could be at that level, or I hope to be at that level, or whatever it is, right? Or next time I see a server or somebody that can help your business, I'm definitely going to refer them to you. In the meantime, here's what my need is, right? So they might not be able to offer you anything right now, but maybe it's something in the future. The point is that mentorship is a two-way road. Yeah. And part of that is like going back to this little basketball tutorial I did this morning is that two-way road doesn't mean that they have to bring something right then and there. So this little girl that I'm kind of coaching in the car, it doesn't mean she has to do anything, but what do I expect from her to some extent? I expect that when she comes home from camp one day, that I'm speaking with her and I ask her about camp, she tells me about camp. That's what I receive from it. Is that she says, hey, Michael, I've practiced my dribbling today. Awesome. Now it's a two-way street. And so I think what you're talking about is very important for entrepreneurs and business leaders to listen and understand, is that mentorship is one thing. What you're talking about is business. And that's really important.
Well, it's the value of relationships, right? And so you're talking about your kids and asking for it. So obviously we're personally invested in seeing our kids doing well.
Right.
But we're also talking about, let's say, so-and-so's neighbor, right? Their kid calls you. There's a little bit of a familiarity. You know who the kid is. They ask you, hey, I'm looking for expertise. You're jumping at the opportunity because you want to help. Because that's a young person. They're looking for expertise. When you get older, those things, those relationships, it takes a little bit more work, right? That 40-year-old, 50-year-old. Now, if they're calling me and they're saying, I have a need, I can help you this way, or I'd like to help you by providing this. Can you help me this way? It doesn't need to be completely transactional, but there needs to be some sort of, you invite me over, Michael, to your house on Friday night. I'm bringing a bottle of wine.
Right.
I don't drink wine, but I'm bringing a bottle of wine. Why? Because that's kind of one of the things you do. You don't show up empty-handed, right? And so I think we need to think about things, building relationships, collaborative favors. Effort. You're thinking about it like a dinner party. What's the polite thing to do? What's the right thing to do?
How can I bring something?
How can I bring something to the table? Right. I don't want to show up empty-handed to this conversation, and I suggest young people to follow that as well. Right. I mean, you know that somebody's successful and their time is valuable. Hey, can I cut your grass? Can I get you coffee? Can I do this? I suggest you do that well. But I think the incredibly valuable thing about doing this kind of stuff when you're young is that we don't expect a 16-year-old, a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old even necessarily to have it all together. And so the opportunity to go out and ask for mentorship is just really above and beyond available to somebody in need like that, right? And so wherever walk of life you come from, whatever income stream, it really doesn't matter. If you're approaching people, if you're polite and you're asking for mentorship and you show a genuine interest in that trade or profession, don't show up and halfway.
I think to your point, it's and I like that we're going down this road now, which is really talking about mentorship. Is again, it's the value that they bring too is the knowledge that they have kind of brought into it. In other words, hey, Cameron, I've read such and such books on staffing. I've read such and such books on different types of events and everything. And I have some questions. Would you be able to answer them? So in other words, they've done their homework. They've done the research.
What books have you read on stage? You're going to teach me something.
Exactly. But now you're having a better conversation. Whereas to come in and just say, hey, I need a job, right? You're like, wait a second. It doesn't matter who you are. Like, I'm glad that you're eager, right? But you got to show me a little bit that you've invested a little bit of your time, your free time, into what this is that you want to get involved in.
Yeah.
And that's part of the whole mentorship relationship is, I think that, at our age too is, I have a coach, right? So I invest money and time. You invest money and time into a coach. People respect that. When I go to somebody else, I bring that value of my coach's, whatever she offers me, and I share that with them. And in turn, they share information and knowledge with me because they're like, this guy invests in himself. He invests in learning and reading and all this other stuff. So I'm going to invest in him because I know in turn that person, he's going to be able to bring it back to be tenfold, which is what happens in mentorship, is that you reach out to somebody to become your mentor to some extent, and eventually you start being on the same page as them, and you start helping them, which is wonderful, right?
It's relationships, right? It goes back to relationships.
It becomes beautiful. Yeah. It's a great thing. I want to go back into your story a little bit about, you talked about not completing high school.
Yeah.
And I think this is really an important part of your life because you've talked about it several times so far in this podcast, in this incompletion that you've had. Yeah. However, you're an accomplished business person. And I think that when we listen to a podcast like this, where we're entrepreneurs or we're business leaders and we're trying to succeed in life, we think about our failures, we think about all these things. Sometimes they drive us, and then there's a certain point where they don't drive us any further. And so I wonder for you, I'm sure that not graduating drove you to some extent. And at what point did you just say, you know what, who cares that I didn't graduate? Because it seems that you eventually shed that.
Well, I still, to this day, I care. I think about going back to school.
But you got your GED, right?
I did. So when I was 19, I had a child. And so coming from a split parent home, right? My mom's in California. My dad's raising me in New York City. I have this child at 19. And so it's a sobering experience, right? Because I'm sitting there in the hospital. Baby was 5 months premature, born into a hospital toilet, into a apartment toilet.
Tell that story a little bit, because you mentioned it in the piece here, but I think this is
So I had a relationship. I met my girlfriend at the time at NYU, and I was taking a class, and this crazy kind of stuff. Like, this kid is in New York City. He's going to a high school called School of the Future in New York City. And so you say, man, this, and I told my, dad when even younger than that, at that time, when he asked me, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be rich. And so we talk about, I've been doing college career mentorship for the last 26 years. And so everything is about, what are you doing right now to get where you want to be 20 years from now? And so the reason I'm so passionate about setting things up and talking about things that way was I doing anything at that time to set myself for what I wanted? Absolutely nothing. And then the fact that I'm having this child, I realized not only am I sort of messing up my trajectory, I'm putting this child on this trajectory for pain and sorrow. I remember those days being in New York City, wanting my mama. Right. And so I knew it was very sobering. Like, what are you doing to this kid? Right. And so at that point, I'm going after the GED. I'm like, all right, I'm going to get my stuff together. I'm going to make my, something of myself. And so I go after the college career, but still, mentorship, opportunities. I'm in the heart of New York City. Am I looking at the financial resources that I need to get me through a 4-year education? No, I'm not. Am I looking at the educational resources at the colleges that I'm potentially applying to really make sure they're a good fit for what I want to do in life, and have people there that are going to feed me and groups? No, I'm not. And so I go through 2 years at New School after following the girl in the red leather pants on the college tour and said, oh, this is the school for me. And I'm dropping out, right? Because it just wasn't making sense financially, wasn't feeding me educationally from a point of view where I thought it was going to get me anywhere further than where I was at the moment, which was bartending. And so I started my hospitality career. I'm really good at hospitality. I'm great at serving people. And so I started down that line. I went through being a bartender at World Yacht, those boats that sail around New York City. And so it was a great bartending job.
So how old were you doing that?
At that time, I started doing that around 19. And so that was like the first.
You had, since dropped out and all that.
So yeah, it was like mix of that journey, but I had started bartending already, and just didn't seem like my education and my.
Do you think that the piece with the education was that you were thinking so far ahead that you just didn't see how that moment in the that education in the moment was going to get you to where you wanted to be?
You know how they say, if you don't plan, you plan to fail? Mm-hmm. That's basically where I was.
Okay.
There was no plan, right? And so, I'm running. But
I don't know too many high school kids that have a plan. I would have never gone to college if my mother didn't enroll me. I wasn't going to college.
So
I was dropping out.
You have to keep this in mind, right? Was my dad's hand on the wheel? No.
No. Okay.
Right. Our relationship was souring because I was 18 years old and in a relationship with a woman and not respecting my house. And then 19, I had a kid. My father didn't approve, didn't know how to communicate that with me. He was a single dad. That's important.
And now he's a lot older too now, right?
Right.
He's got to be in his 50s.
He's approaching his 60s, right?
Yeah,
so,
He's looking to try to retire now, and he's like,
he doesn't know how to communicate things with me. He doesn't know how to give me advice. He's had women troubles. Part of his story around his early 20s, a woman left with all his money, and so he's dealing with emotional baggage. Is he the right person to teach me how to, have a good relationship with a woman? I mean, that's the challenge.
Not if he hasn't grown from it.
So I'm looking at my kid, right? And I'm like, okay, my grandmother had my mother at 19. She had me at 19. I have this kid at 19. What am I setting this kid up for, right? And so I'm seeing, they talk about if you don't learn history's destined to repeat itself. Well,
and just to stay on your kid for a second, because your kid has a very interesting name,
Stone.
Yeah. So I just want to go back to that story about how he was born and where that name comes from.
So Stone, I'm a creative guy. I'm a poet who knows it, right? And so Stone was a name I wanted to give him, something strong, something formidable. With my other 4 children, I have 5 children in total, 4 children with my wife of the last 18 years, Teresa. Every name that we've given to the children, I'm trying to provide them something that sounds like royalty, that gives them some sort of strength. So we have Alexandria as my firstborn daughter with my wife, Leonidas, who is named after the Greek king. If you've seen 300, right, you know who Leonidas is. Martine was named after his grandfather, and then Xander, who's actually Alexander. So we've got a couple of Alexander, right, which is confusing for the doctor's office, but we call him Xander, right? So everybody's got a strong, powerful name that sends a message, right? And so we wanted to gift the kids with nice, strong names. And Stone Solstice Staggers, so he has his mother's last name. Talk about
Solstice is his second name.
Yeah. So talk about history repeating there. I have my mother's last name. He has his mother's last name.
Do you think that you have your mother's last name as a tribute to your mother? Is that what that is?
It is. It's a tribute to her. It's a little piece of history, and so my story, I try to respect and learn from the history so that we're not repeating it, right? And so I think one of the things that sort of kept me with my mother's last name was that was the name that I was born with, and there was a reason for that. And so respecting that history, and you can sort of see it play out with my children now that are all born, so I have Stone, who's my oldest, who I just don't have a great relationship with. And so this is the message, right? You want to, as a young person, be set on the right path to success. We start sort of this piece of the conversation talking about, not having a plan, right? You're planning to fail. And so all of what I'm doing now with my children in my house is around making sure that you have the best plan. And so it's tough. You have a young person, maybe yourself, right? It's tough to say where you want to be in 20 years. Shiny object there, right? What do I truly want? What is my desire? My 11-year-old, every other day, it's a new career path.
Sure.
Shiny object, baseball. I'm like, where are you getting baseball from? I'm like, we don't do anything baseball in the house. Maybe soccer I could see. Maybe basketball. I played basketball in high school. Where's some of this coming from? But they have friends. They're doing things, and so getting yourself some sort of plan. I don't care if the plan is I just want to be in a specific place. Revenue-wise, money, I think that's a challenging path to go down. I'm just listening to Keith Ferrazzi's Never Eat Alone, which I highly recommend anybody listen to the pod. But he talks about when he was a young man.
Oh, I know which one that is, Never Eat Alone, about never having lunch alone, right? Yes, I think I know about that one.
It's kind of like
it's
that.
Always,
it's saying that is like saying Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week is about only working 4 hours a week.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, no.
It's about.
I've heard about it through different BNIs. Yes,
it's really good. You got to pick it up. It's a great book. Audible, picking up the physical version, whatever your flavor is. But he talks about in that when he was a young man, his pinnacle of success was buying the most expensive Brooks Brothers shirt that that was in the store. And so he got to that point, goes in the store. He picks up the shirt. He's wearing it the next day like it's, the biggest deal, right? And I'm sure the rest of the world is looking at it just like another shirt, right? And, he goes to wash that shirt and 2 buttons fall off the shirt. And he's just sitting there like, that was the meaning of my life. That was what this was all about. And so I think so much of life is like that. Well, we all
know he should have dry cleaned it first.
Right. That's what I swear to God, as I'm listening to it, I'm thinking the same goddamn thing, right? So anyway, the idea that, a car, an outfit, an amount of money is going to be the thing that makes us happy. I mean, hopefully, if you're listening to this, you've made it to that point in your life where you understand that's just as far from what is actually going to be true than can be, right? What's going to make you happy are the relationships in your life. What's going to make you happy is knowing that you make a difference as you go out the door in the morning. And that difference could be, you make your wife and kids happy. That difference could be you picked up some debris from the side of the road and made your community a little bit better. I don't care what that difference is, but if you go out and your life has impact. I mentioned the book one more time, Never Eat Alone. Keith Ferrazzi talks about, and I love this idea, being the best person you can be, like being the best, but not being the best person for you, but the best person for the world, right? So I want to be the best person. I want to be the best at being the best person for the world. And that's my passion. That's my motivation. You've heard my story. I ended up going into hospitality because I'm great at hospitality.
I want to go into that story a little bit further. So let's go into that. My passion, my motivation all lies around the story of like my educational journey, dealing with having a son at 19 and knowing that I want to help people not have situations like that as much as possible. And then you look out into the world, right? And you see women that don't have access to education. You have the whole thing in Afghanistan now, but this is something, I mean, eyes or intention are there, but there's lots of places in the world where it's just not socially acceptable for a woman to go to school, and that's crazy, right? Yeah. And to me, that's just mind blowing, right? We take so much for granted here, and then you talk about opportunity, the access to opportunity, right? Just the ability to go out and work. So many people take it for granted here that we just have such amazing opportunity. If somebody wants to really go out and get a job, I know people that will complain, it's a catch-22, the job wants experience and there's no way, but we know if you really want to work and you really want opportunity in this country, it's fairly easy to get. And so my mission in life is to help educate folks to see those opportunities that are right in front of them and expand those opportunities everywhere. I love what you said there. Well, first of all, I love everything you said there because we're talking about a greater purpose. But that last little piece there about opportunity in this country, about opportunity to be able to work and be successful to any means it's so true. And this whole idea of, we had the Great Resignation, and then now we have inflation and all this other stuff happening in our economy that I know nothing about, so I won't speak about at all. But just from the level of what you just said there, my company alone, both companies that I have, right, offer opportunity to sell sponsorship, sell public speaking workshops at Michael Esposito Inc. At Den10, I pay to get people insurance licensed. We'll pay to get you licensed, right? To get you licensed. And all you got to do is go out and sell insurance, sell something that people by law must have.
Wait, right? But Michael, but I have to try to sell somebody something?
Right. And you don't even have to sell them because my business model is all about education. It's about educate people on the things
But that's work, Michael.
Exactly. Educate people on what can avoid a claim. Educate people on why they need insurance.
Wait, I have to educate myself, Michael?
That's right. I
have to learn something?
So that's the point.
Wait, but that means I got to spend time on it. I got to read something. I got to listen to something.
That's it. That's the point. Is that like we make it. You and I, as entrepreneurs, as business leaders, we want to make it as easy as possible for somebody to walk through our door and start working and start earning an income. For you and me, I can make this assumption based on you. We want to make people wealthier than ourselves. Like, I know for me, it's like that whole quote that we've heard over and over again. My maid drives a Rolls Royce, right? That's what I want out of the people that work for me.
Yeah.
So if I want that out of the people that work for me, then the opportunity is there, right? And it's not just my company, it's your company. It's so many companies. Like, I looked at your website and I see some of the people in the pictures on your website. You have some young employees. You have some young people, and they're smiling and they're happy, and they got a tray of stuff that they're cleaning off a table or bringing to a table. I'm almost certain that I could probably go to your website with you right now and go 1, 2, 3. Those people are still with you, and they've surpassed and exceeded where they were at in that picture. Am I right?
Yeah, no, I think one of the happiest feelings, several of the happiest feelings, but I've had staff that, came to me when they were fairly young, and they told me that, through working with Toth Event Staffing, they were able to purchase a car.
Phenomenal.
The happiest moments for me are when staff are like, yeah, I'm not available. I got a full-time job. It's a little frustrating because I'm in the staff.
You're like, I trained you, man.
I'm in the staffing industry. So, I'm looking for people that are available to go out and work events. But it's a great feeling to know that somebody's in a place, they're set, they're comfortable. They don't get that job if they didn't work for you first, because you've provided the framework for them to get there. You've helped them with the resume. Everybody's going to do success. Hopefully everybody will go out and do amazing without me. But I know, this is one particular story. A woman came in to me for an interview, and these are the happiest moments because, again, my passion is around opportunity, mentorship, helping people along. And hospitality, we go out, we create these great events. My goal is to provide great service. I want people to do a great job, have fun, get paid, period, right? Helping people's lives get better through, one, making our clients' events fabulous and enjoyable and easy so that they have a good time and can enjoy their families, their events, their company. One of the great things I think in terms of networking and socializing is actually being at the event that you're hosting and actually being able to mix and mingle with your guests and not worrying about, is the bar supplied? Is there, a mess on the floor? Somebody needs this, somebody needs that. That's what our staff do. We take care of those pieces so that you can actually enjoy your time. So that's very important to me. On the staff side of it, I want to make sure that they have a good time because a lot of our folks have other jobs. They have other things going on, and they're doing this as side hustle, part-time work, right? Yeah. And so I want to make sure those opportunities are there for them, consistently available. I want to make sure that when they're doing it, they have a good time, both from I just try to be a good dude kind of thing, but also if they go out and they have a good time, they're more likely to say yes to the next opportunity, right? And so I try to build the culture around that. But I had this experience with this woman. She was coming into the interview, and interviews I love. I wish I could do all the interviews, but as we grow the company, I got to have other people doing them. But when I'm doing interviews, I enjoy them so much because I get to ask questions like, where are you trying to go? What are you trying to do? And this one woman, she was just graduated from accounting school, and it's amazing with hospitality and hiring waiters and bartenders and chefs. I have actors and lawyers and literally doctors that have worked with me, people that you wouldn't, expect, like what they have a doctor's degree and they're a waiter. Yeah, because people need money.
They need money to get through school.
Right. And so, this is the opportunity that we provide as entrepreneurs, right? It's work. Maybe you got another dream that you're working on, but you got to get through XYZ to get there. And this is paycheck weekly. You go out, you work, you leave it at work, right? Just you do that shift and you go home. But anyways, I'm doing this interview with this young woman. She just graduated from accounting school. And we're talking about, her dreams, her desires. And I'm interviewing places, and I walk through with her just a couple of things on, one, negotiation, right? And two, making sure that she had lots of applications out, right? That she wasn't just, application into one company, they say yes, and you join because
right.
Your lifetime salary is going to be dictated on that starting salary, right? And so you're in the insurance business, this whole thing with the investment side. If you're starting here with your investment versus this larger amount over here over time, right? That money's it's gonna make a big difference. And so if you start at a $1,000, $2,000, $5,000 higher salary over the years, that's going to turn into a lot more money. And so I was telling her, make sure you understand what's going on in the market. And so she, we go through all this in the interview. She listened. And she calls,
which is huge, right? like I love that you paused right after you said that, because we experience that so often.
Yeah.
She listened.
So
go ahead.
She listened, and she took some of the advice, and she called. And the reason I know this is she called me later on, and she said, I interviewed a couple places. When it came time to negotiate, I negotiated. I'm happy. I got a spot that I'm really excited about. I'm in. Over the moon. And so that's in terms of happiness and going out the door and feeling like you made a difference.
Yeah.
There it is.
I mean, and that's what I'm speaking to as well when we're talking about these opportunities that we have for in this country, but even for people like that, is just them listening and absorbing that information. And then like you just said, you're over the moon, we're happy to see them take on that success and opportunity. I mean, it's like why we do our podcast. You have a podcast too. It's like, why do I do this? I don't get paid to do this. Nobody pays me to do this. I do this because I enjoy it. One, I learned from it. I learned from people like yourself. I sit in this seat here and I get to learn firsthand from you. But two, then I get to give it to others. And some people come to me afterwards and say, "Hey, I listened to that podcast. It helped me out."
Yeah.
And
how good did it? Because there's different moments when you're doing a podcast or putting anything out. But when the number ticks up, 500th subscriber, 5,000 subscriber, 1 million subscriber, whatever that kind of thing is, there's a certain feeling as you get to that number, and you think, "Oh wow, that's going to feel amazing." There's going to be I don't know. There's going to be confetti that goes off.
Right.
I want to feel this. And then that number ticks by, and you're like, okay, I just wonder what it takes to get to 10. What's the next number? But you get that phone call, that says you made a difference,
right?
Or you get that message that says, "Oh, this was really impactful for me. This helped me." That's a feeling.
There's a couple of things there too that you just said. So one, just what you're talking about, that feeling there. It's an incredible feeling because it means that people are listening, right? It means that someone's listening. You don't know because it's a podcast. So we don't know that somebody's listening or not listening. But you get a text message of "Hey, I've been listening to your podcast and here's something," or they share somebody with me, and that, like you said, I'm like, whoa, I'm like, wow. But the other thing I want to make sure that people know too is while you just said that, 1,000 subscribers, 500, that number, every one of them still matter to us.
Yeah.
It's just that we always have this idea of all right, my goal is 500 subscribers. I got there.
But it's like money in the bank, right? It's at the end of the day, it's a little different with subscribers because the numbers represent people, or at least
that's
we hope they do. Well, right? That's a whole nother side conversation, but we don't. I feel like, in terms of doing something, one of the reasons I started BizDev Live was I was looking at what Gary Vee was doing, right? Gary Vaynerchuk.
Yeah, very, very big influence in what I do.
And he jumps on live, and it's immediately this really loaded conversation. There's tons of people asking his advice. And for me, that's something to look up to because if you're able to grow, and we talked about the power of associations, bringing different people in. And so if you're able to immediately go live and make an impact and help people, and that's the biggest thing. And I think, I really, 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 people can look at Gary Vee and, they can look at the whole V Friends with the crypto and the, I'm going to forget the.
Well, don't worry, I don't even know what the names. You've gone above my head now.
But so V Friends is, and people will help us out if they're listening to this. But is the digital exclusive items that you can build now. I'm totally blowing the name of it. When you need the specific name, it goes out the head. But So VFriends are these digital things.
And it has to do with Gary Vee and his following.
So, people can look at like different things that he's doing and be like, I'm not interested in that. But one of the things that is just incredibly valuable that Gary Vee does is like he takes all of his knowledge, everything that he does. And I truly believe, although if you go into a room and you're paying the $10,000 or $50,000, whatever, to get direct marketing advice, obviously he's going to speak directly to your situation. But I've heard over the years, like everything that he knows, he's just throwing out there. And as long as you're sort of taking that and applying it to your own situation, I don't think it would be very different from being in the room. Like he's sharing that same information with you. And so his value in helping people is
the only difference of being in the room that I've learned, and I'm sure you have too, of working with experts like that is they're able. We have unique challenges in all of our businesses. We have unique strategies in our businesses and missions. And so what someone like Gary Vee or anybody experts in our local areas that help us is they speak specifically to that and that game plan.
Well,
whereas
it's the same reason we're paying for coaching.
Exactly. The free information that you get is kind of like an overall.
I could go read a book.
Right. And it's up to you to kind of apply it to your business. So
I can read a book, or I can develop a relationship with somebody that has relationships with other people and it's about, if you read Think and Grow Rich, right? The idea that there's a few different ways that you can pull in knowledge. You can go to school, you can go to the books, or you can hire.
That's right.
And so what's going to be the quickest way to get you to where you want to go in the world? And, I love Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He talks about Ford. I was
thinking the same story. The push of a button. I can have any one of my associates.
Right, I don't need to know XYZ. I can push a button and bring it in. And so you can fill your head with facts and figures and everything. But if you got a goal and you know where you're trying to go, and that's what I talk about in my story. All the opportunity was available to me, and I just wasn't taking advantage of it. And so we all have buttons, and some of them, yes, there's a cost behind it, and usually that's as you're leveling up. All right,
that cost is an investment, though. That's what I would argue. Is just that when I look at all of the different experts that I've hired in my business to get me to where I am today, they're an investment in the business. They're all partners to me. I call them partners. It's confusing to some people that don't really understand because they're like, oh, well, are they owning the business? No, they don't own any piece of the business, but they're a partner to me because they're invested in my business. Like, I mean, Katie, for instance, who's started off as just managing my social media and is now like, I call her director of marketing because I'm just like, if I'm putting her on a call with somebody.
You got to introduce me to Katie. All
right. They got to know who she is. They got to understand her purpose in my company. Katie jumps on calls. She's just like, just put them on my calendar. I'll meet with them first for you. Yeah. I mean, and that's just her. She's just like, that's not charging. That's just, she's like, I need to know if they fit the purpose and the mission that Den 10 has. And that's her investment in me.
And that to me is because a lot of people will hear us say, well, you got to pay for the knowledge, pay for the coach, pay for and somebody's head will go to, well, I've been there before. I've been burned. I paid for XYZ. I went to this college and I paid all this money. And so what I really try to help people find out is that everybody's a little bit different. One, right? You individually are different. And then every source of knowledge has value to someone. It just may not be to you. Mm-hmm. So you have to really navigate, and going after a lawyer, vendor, whatever. But, I was thinking lawyer in terms of like, you got a legal issue and you want to go to a lawyer. There's some people that will charge you for that first session. There's some people that'll do that first session for free. And so it's really challenging because when you're in a legal jam, right, you who do I go to? And that's where the value of building networks is, right? Because if I know Michael, and I know a few other people, I can go to them, hey, have you ever been in a legal jam? Who have you used, right? And then I get that from a few different people because I can't just assume that the lawyer that worked for Michael is going to be a good fit for me because we're all a little bit different. We all have different situations and everybody has different times in their life. So just because the lawyer was good for Michael at that time doesn't mean they're going to be good for me at this time. And so you have to sort of be that person to put in the work. Oh my goodness, we went back there to work, right? We got to put in the work and make a few phone calls and feel things out. Because if you go with that first person, it's just like that person that I was talking to about the job. If you just accept the first offer that comes across the table, is it necessarily a good move? Is it a good cultural fit? Is it a place that's going to pay? You don't need
context to know. You need the context. I think to what you're saying, a couple of things there is that one, you're talking about the decision-making process too, is that you're going to get information and you have to make a decision. And that's what makes entrepreneurship so challenging, is that we don't know what the right decision is all the time. Yeah. But in the moment, we know, our gut tells us, our mind tells us, our history tells us that I got to make a decision right now. Am I going to completely go all in with this person or this company now to be part of my partnership here? Or, you know what? I'm not getting the value I think I should be getting. I need to go elsewhere. So there's that decision-making process that I've learned it's challenging. I mean, because you form relationships with some of these vendors, these partners, and they're great relationships. You love them, but you're not getting what you need, and you have to make a decision to move forward and go somewhere else. And the other thing you're speaking about is the network. What I would
the value of the network.
What I would emphasize in this network here is, you and I've both heard this from people. Well, I'm in an insurance, so I only need to know underwriters and real estate brokers and mortgage brokers. I don't need to know anybody else, right? And that is so untrue. You need to know as many people, because you never know when or where they're going to fit into your life, into your business, into any component of your life. I was on a call yesterday, and it was with literally underwriters of an insurance company. And people don't really need to know what underwriters are, but basically they're the back office. They're the backbone to the insurance carriers, that is, right? So they're the back office. So they don't have to have interpersonal relationships with lawyers or with accountants, or they don't have to network. They don't have to do any of that. So LinkedIn got brought up for some reason. And the majority of them do not have LinkedIn accounts. And I said, oh yeah, you guys don't need it. Like just placating the conversation. But in reality, they need it. They need it because maybe they do need a lawyer, like you said, for a personal issue. Maybe they do need an insurance broker for a personal issue outside of what's going on inside of their company, right? Maybe they need another job and they just need a presence on social media so that employer knows who they are, right? So it doesn't matter what you're doing. Expand your network so that, to your point there, is you don't have to ask Michael for the lawyer. You know the lawyer. And you can ask the lawyer for their lawyer friends.
The piece of this, and coming up here today to do this interview with you, I was thinking about, some things that I wanted to talk about. And innovation was one of the things that I wanted to make sure came into this conversation. I'm very happy you brought that up. Right. And so innovation is a tricky kind of thing, especially if you're like a service-oriented industry. Underwriting, I would say, is definitely in the service-oriented, right? It's not like, I'm selling candy bars or widgets or things like that. Innovation in some of these industries is a little hard to distinguish. How do you innovate? And we just actually went through a wild time with the pandemic where industries that are not known for innovating, like banks and insurance companies, right? Suddenly, all the things that had to be done on hard paper, we can do a PDF digitally now.
Yeah.
What? Wait, I have had to own this fax machine for the last 10 years because you said, right? And so,
do you know how many times I've been told with my agency that I need to have a fax machine?
Oh my God.
And it stopped. It's finally stopped because I said no. I kept saying no.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think it was the most humorous thing when I'm dealing with like government agencies 10 years ago, and they're like, "Can you fax it?" I'm like, "Why would I have a fax machine? Why do you have a fax machine? Have you heard of this innovation called email? It's really great,
and it's time stamped and all that. So don't give me that.
Yeah. It's rough trying to deal with industry that hasn't innovated, but this idea of innovation, right? And so, if you're in a building, a cubicle somewhere, or let's say you're working from home, like so many people, and you don't have these association relationships. So, early on when, or actually even before I got into being an entrepreneur, I joined MPI, Meeting Professionals International. And funny story, if you can imagine, for anybody that's listening to this audibly, I'm 5'8". Right now I'm at a weight of about 180, but in my 20s I was probably 165, maybe 170 soaking wet. So 5'8" guy, 170 pounds. I was working security for the CV Rich Mansion in White Plains, and I got in trouble. I sat a kid down at a bar mitzvah. He was running through the hall with one of those big wooden sticks with the little metal piece on the end to like open the windows. So this thing is a javelin.
Right.
Like this is a lance.
13-year-old kid.
Yeah, this 13-year-old could probably younger than that, right? 12, 13, whatever. Running through the party. I'm like, nope. That's not good. That's what my duty here is, to make sure that things like this are not happening. Fires are not being set, those kind of things. So I made the mistake of putting my hand on this child and put it on his shoulder and sat him down. And so that turned into a big deal. The manager on that party brought me into the owners of the company. And it was really interesting because I don't even remember the name of the guy at the time that this is all happening. Just know that it's happening. And I got fired. So years later, working for the Scianomics Group based in an office in Stamford, Connecticut, one of the ladies exposed me to this organization, MPI, Meeting Professionals International, because now I'm in the meetings world. And so, all right, let me get some education around this. I fall in love with the organization because I go to a meeting and they're doing a Disney presentation, and they talk about the brain science. When you go into a Disney park, everything that you need at the beginning of the day is on your right. And everything that you need for like trinkets and go home stuff when you're coming out of the park is on the right. Because you're coming the other way, right? Yeah. It's on the left when you're coming. You don't even notice it. You don't even notice it's there because your brain automatically looks to the right. Yeah. And then at the end, you're surprised. Oh, look, there's a store with all this stuff. You passed it. You didn't even realize it, right? And so it's right there, but our brain just automatically looks to the right, right? And so
I always love how they make you exit through the gift shop.
Right. And that's the whole design of the park, right? Everything you need is on the right when you're coming in. Everything that you need going out of the park is on the right when you're going. I fell in love with this organization, this education that I was getting for being a part of this association. But you go there for the education and the networking. And so as I'm moving along in my story, and for folks that have heard my story before, in 2009, I find myself in Mexico. My wife came into the country illegally. She's Mexican. And so when they talk about there's no path to citizenship, at that point in 2009, we'd been married for 5 years. She had 2 children with me, 2 U.S. citizen children with me. I think politicians impolitely refer to them as anchor babies or something like that, right? So at that point, there's no path to citizenship. We had to leave the country. So, and it's kind of weird, the U.S. Justice system, if you get in trouble, if you get in legal trouble, it's actually easier if you're a criminal to stay in the United States than to be a law-abiding citizen. When everybody, they broke the law when they came into the country. Folks looking for opportunity coming into our country, yes, they broke a law. And I'm not here to do the whole immigration debate, but it's not a very fair system. But anyways, we find ourselves in Ciudad Juarez, which is not a lovely place. My wife is originally from Huejotzingo, which is a lovely town. We're in Ciudad Juarez, just over the border from El Paso. That is where the U.S. consulate is, where we had to go. So we have to go out of the country to Mexico, to U.S. soil at the U.S. consulate to do our paperwork. Doesn't make sense. We go up to the door and...
Right, it doesn't make sense.
No. So we go up to the door, and so I'm thinking, my wife's going to get interviewed for this appointment. We had actually our 2 U.S. citizen children in our arms. They're like, yeah, she can come in, you can't. So my wife, who, this whole immigration thing is for, but she's married to the U.S. citizen. The U.S. citizen cannot come in. She can't even bring a cell phone in with her. And so and luckily they let one of the children, because I don't know what I would have been doing standing outside holding both of my children, but I'm there just waiting for my wife. She has no way to contact me, let me know what's going on. I got one of our children sleeping in my arms. We're literally at that time.
A little levity to this. It's hot outside too, right?
It's hot. It's a little warm in that time. And that was 2009 January, so it's winter, but it was a warm day because it's south in Mexico. But I'm just sitting outside in the dirt waiting for my wife for, which was probably like 2-3 hours at least. And at the end of that, they tell us she's going to have to stay in Mexico for at least the next 14 to 15 months while they review a document, which just happened to be the birth certificate for my child that I had about 19, and talk about the lawyers and not having the right fit and all that kind of stuff, and the value of making sure you do things yourself. The lawyers, and we had talked to them about it, had not put in the birth certificate for the child at 19. So even though we paid them thousands of dollars to put this whole packet together, so now we're sitting in Mexico. And at the same time, I'm getting a call from my company in Stamford, Connecticut. Oh, we're laying you off.
I was going to ask you about that.
Right. And so 50 out of 100 people at that time laid us off. And so, whole story works out. They finally let my wife back into the country. We've been married for 18 years. We have 4 kids together. But the whole point I was talking about is the association that I was a part of really helped me in establishing Toth Event Staffing and becoming an entrepreneur, because the same guy that fired me, the guy that was the head boss, not the manager, because I had handled that situation without having a fit and saying F you to everybody. I just was like, okay, I don't agree with that, but thank you very much. He sees me. I'm a member of the association. We're doing an event. I think I'm part of the leadership team at that time in the association. He's there advertising the catering company that he works with for sponsoring one of our events. He sees me. Suddenly, I'm working for him again. As a captain this time, not as a security guard.
Right, and a captain is, I know that you just
for events, that's the person that's in charge of other staff. Right. So you hire me for your bat mitzvah, your wedding, whatever. The captain is your one-point liaison to make sure that everything's going on time. The DJ knows what's going on, or DJ cues me so I can make sure the dinner's coming out at the right time, or the cake is going over, all that stuff, making sure that things are set up right and broken down right. The guy that's actually in charge of the event.
Yeah, the maitre d' of sorts. Yeah.
Which was a much higher position than security guard.
Yeah.
And that was all based on the value, because he saw me in a different light, being a member of the association.
Right.
A few years later, like, oh, this guy's got it together.
You touched on innovation, which I want to go to, but you did also touch on some things that we don't have to get into the political of it all, but I'm interested in the emotion of it, because it's not every day that I have somebody come in and speak about their spouse and say, they're an immigrant, an illegal immigrant in the eyes of the law. I don't view it that way either.
She's U.S. citizen now. I'm on
the same page. I'm on the same page as you. I mean, our country was founded in offering opportunity, and I don't see why we shouldn't continue to do so. Right. So the question that I have for you that I'm interested in just from the emotional aspect of it, just because you brought it up, is the anchor baby statement there, right? Like that. I'm just interested in the conversation, if you're willing to speak, to share the conversations that you and Teresa have at the dinner table or at home about these things that are happening in our world, or that have been really coming to a head in the past couple of years. I'm just interested in like what her thoughts are, what your thoughts are as a family, what it feels like, just a little insight into the world of a family that has somebody who's a U.S. citizen, that has a spouse who they love tremendously, who's not, or I don't know if she is today, right? Or I think she is based on that story, and then had to go through all of this, and then has this media that puts things out and that says things that are really hurtful to not just you and her, but what about these kids that get called this, right? So I'm just interested in a little insight so that people can understand firsthand from someone like you.
I think it's really difficult for me to understand. For Teresa, I know from our conversations, it's hard to listen to. It's a hard thing to hear about your fellow, we'd say in Spanish, paisanos, right, or the Italian, right? Your fellow country people being treated in just horrible, nasty ways, and the nastiest thing is that it's not just a Mexican or Latino thing. We've seen it with the way that Muslims and Asians are treated, just for being different and being in the United States. And it's a shame that in 2022 that these are even stories. But you have people that are sitting there in the world saying the election was stolen, the Holocaust didn't really happen. You got people that believe in these alternate truths and alternate realities, and it's a lot to sort of process. And so I think a lot of people just shut down, and they say, well, I just don't want to deal with it. And so, unfortunately, these voices expressing really distasteful stuff take on a louder volume because a lot of people, rather than challenging it, stepping in to make sure that people understand that they're not in agreement with that, stay quiet. And, I count myself among that group. I wish I had the emotional energy to be more outspoken and, get my poster and walk down to the corner and fight it every day. But it's emotionally draining. It's really emotionally draining. And so I'm really, really, really appreciative of the people that do. And I think that Teresa would agree with that, we're really appreciative of people that are standing on the front lines and speaking up. AOC in Congress, Alexandria Ortiz, right? She is somebody that, I admire greatly because she is very vocal and knows how to use social media and speaks out in a way that sort of fires back and takes some of the media circus away from demagogues and people that clearly don't even believe the nastiness they're spewing. It's just, you were talking about before, all the stuff in the media. There's amazing things happening right now. And this is something for every entrepreneur and business person that's listening to this. It's an amazing, abundant world. This is the best time in the history of the world to ever be living. The amount of disease and percentage of the population that lives longer, this is the best time ever. But if you go to, your cable news network, what are you led to believe? We're everywhere is in war and there's another weather apocalypse happening tomorrow. And that's not to say that there isn't incredibly nasty things happening.
Yeah, they focus on the negative. I think I want to go to, because you talked about innovation, and I think this is a great thing to go into, is the abundance that's available to entrepreneurs and innovation that's happening today. What are you seeing in terms of innovation in event staffing and your industry?
So specifically for me, I wanted to talk about innovation because for my own office, and this is where I want people to sort of apply innovation to their own lives, you can get very easily stuck in doing things the way that you've always done them. And we were talking about the value of coaching, value of associations. And so through working with other people, through listening to podcasts, through seeing some different examples of the way that things can be done, suddenly your eyes get opened to the fact that you can do things differently. And so, a couple of years ago, I was looking at event app companies where basically you would hire staff, like the Uber. Everybody wanted to create the Uber of staffing.
So there's so many, right?
Go on to an app, and I'm hiring staff. And I was very resistant in the sense of like, I don't want to do that because that's going to take the personal touch out of staffing people. But there's ego in that, right? And so a big part of what I've been pushing forward and transitioning as we're coming back from the pandemic is, how can we get our office paperless? How can we get to a place where we can operate with an app? Not because I think it's all important for what I'm doing right now, but going back to what we want to do, right? We want to do things right now that's going to get us where we want to be in 20 years.
Right.
And I know that I can't get there without innovating, without seeing what's going on in the world and applying that to my business. We're doing things with Google Voice with the phones to free up our ability to make sure that anybody can be contacted and there's an actual number. And so these are services that are low cost versus some of these other providers, because there's going to be these IT companies that are going to come in and want to sell you thousands of dollars for service. And so there's things that we've been using for the last, I want to say like the last 8-9 years. I mean, I use the whole Office of Google Suite stuff that anybody can sort of access from anywhere. And so you're talking about going paperless, and I have the challenge of I have a physical calendar. And so getting that and continuing to push myself to get better at looking at alternatives, getting our office space. I moved just recently as we're coming back from the pandemic and getting busy again. I'd had satellite offices in the Chrysler building before, but my main office was really based out of my house. And as an entrepreneur, a lot of us, that's what we do.
That's right. Yeah.
But for me, if I want to have an office in Miami and LA and Chicago, if I can't run an office out of my house across the street, right, I'm never going to get there. And so we signed a 6-month lease, and we have an office that's literally like less than a minute drive from my house, but it's not in my house. And so that frees things up. Because it's not in my house, I can run nighttime training events and really keep moving the ball forward and innovating within my product category. And then, I just started reading the Ultimate Sales Machine, and he just started talking about the idea of, well, you want to get more clients, but are you actually maximizing your current clients, right? And so that's not a new concept. I imagine most of the people that are listening to this pod have heard something along those lines before. But innovating requires you to continually go back to that idea and say, all right, what are other things that I can market to my clients? What are ways that we can do? And so I get a lot of, Friday, Saturday night parties with my clients. Well, what if we combine the idea of, I've been obsessed with this book, I'm going to say it again, Never Eat Alone, right? What if we offer a service talking about the benefits of making sure you get your, contacts together, like some of our Goldman Sachs clients, like some of our folks that we know that we deal with that do this, and do that on a regular basis. So market to my clients, let's do this as a monthly dinner. And maybe there's a package deal that I can give you, or maybe no package deal, just encourage them to do it on a monthly basis, however it works for you cost-wise, right? But the idea that you can always, especially if you have a current customer base, you can always serve them better. You can always find a way to create a business model within your business model that's going to benefit your bottom line, benefit your employees. We just did something recently. We had been doing a service charging one rate. So we charge out for chefs at $55 an hour. You get the chef that's going to come into your home, and they can do a cheese board for you and everything. But we had some clients that sort of took that and went a step further. Well, we want to do a whole menu. And we sort of thought, all right, sure, we're yes. Right? What do entrepreneurs say? We say, yes. We can do it. Now, that's great. But if I go out and I hire a private chef, they're going to do probably something along the lines of a per person kind of menu. So you're going to pay $120, $130, maybe $150, maybe $200 a head for this private chef to come in, maybe with some, assistant staff to do this dinner party for you. And so, our clients were getting a pretty sweet deal. We were charging them, plus the cost of them picking up the food, $55 an hour, for this thing where you're feeding 6-10 people and everything. So this is a good deal. But it isn't a great deal for my talented, excellent, amazing, experienced staff who are also looking at, well, I could be over here doing the private chef thing and getting paid all this money, but I'm over here making this amount. And so we started taking a look at that. One of our staff said, hey, exactly that. Like, I don't really want to do this. I can go over here and do that. We're like, you know what? You're right. And so we listened to our staff. And so we created this whole other personal chef service. It's a higher dollar rate. We make more money. The staff makes more money. We get to satisfy a little nice niche for people that are looking for that, which saves the client money, by the way, right? Because it's still a huge savings over going out and getting a private chef and paying this $120, $130 price. They get to customize their menu, bring their stuff in, bring their favorite cake from so-and-so still, right? All that kind of stuff. And it's a win, win, win all the way across the board, and more revenue for Toth Event Staffing. And so that's what I talk about, innovation. And so you have to be open. You got to listen, right? You can't be egotistical in the sense that you know everything and you know the best way to do everything. You have to be open to doing things in a little bit of a different way.
Yeah, I think that's great. That is the heart of innovation is listening and open to doing things differently, and then focusing on that thing that's always been done. So it's applying all of that to that thing that's always been done, because we're not changing anything. Events have been going on for years. Insurance has been going on for a year. We're not changing anything. We're looking at what we've already been doing, and we're looking at it a little bit differently. Absolutely. We're listening to somebody, and then we're applying something different to it. So I love that. I think that's great. I think, this is the longest podcast that I've done now, an hour and 30. I know that we can go on.
I can talk, yeah.
Yeah, I know we can go on for another hour 30, but I do want to kind of bring this to some kind of conclusion, but I can only see us working together on a couple things. I'm already thinking about the event that I just mentioned early at the top of the show. I'm like, man, I got to pick your brain.
I know a lot of people.
I got to collaborate with you on this, because
shout out to Steve Spiro, who's the master connector. We'll get him involved. He's the master connector. We'll get you connected.
We certainly have a lot of collaborations, and I'm thinking too on we have a lot more to talk about and bring you back. So I think that's another thing for our listeners to think about. But speaking of coming back, your mantra that you live by is connect what you're doing right now to where you want to be 20 years from now. Yeah. Now, if you've been listening to this podcast, that's nothing new to anybody that's been listening, because you've been talking about setting a plan for your future. But just let's encapsulate this entire podcast into that mantra there, and where that came from. Share a little bit more about that, expand on that a little bit, or drop the mic, however you want.
So I think I'm close to beating it to death, but the idea is, even if you don't know exactly what you want 20 years from now, you probably have some ideas of what would be really nice. And so pick that goal, set that goal, and work towards it. Just the way you would at the beginning of the marathon, you'd want to know where you're running to, because you want to be prepared. And if you're not running towards the finish line, what are you running towards? You have to pick a point. You have to pick a destination. I went out for a charity golf tournament. And so even though there was no way with my limited skills on the golf course that I was going to be able to drive the ball all the way to the flag for a hole in one, I still want to know which way I'm hitting the ball.
That's great. Yeah. I love that. That's one I have not heard before. That's a good one. I want to thank you so much for coming on the show today. If there's any handles, websites that you'd like to share with our guests, with our listeners, go ahead and share those. But all of that will be in the show notes, and you can find it on the iHeartMedia platform and also on YouTube.
Yeah, man. If you've enjoyed my voice, you can hear a lot more of it on BizDev Live. You can find that on YouTube by searching up BizDev Live or Cameron Toth, and you can find me there. And then I also encourage you to check out Steve Spiro and I's show, The Master Connector Show. If you want to learn about networking and connecting a little bit more, that is the show to go to. And if you're an entrepreneur, you're in the right place. I'm so excited to be here with Michael Esposito. This is a great conversation. Thank you, dude.
Cool, man. Thank you. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. Thank you for listening to the Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.